Welcome to Story Time. Could you make it as a slave in Roman times? You carry the tray with both hands because the figs sweat, and the watered wine wants to run, and if either reaches the floor, the house will make a sentence out of you. Your master argues Cicero by the impluvium, spinning words like coins, and his friends clink their cups at every phrase that lands with the weight of a law. But before we begin, let's pause while you get comfortable. Fluff your pillow, pull those blankets up tight, and settle into your favorite spot. Your eyes flicker open to darkness, just the faintest glow of dawn peeking in. You stand barely inside the mosaic border, and your shadow does not cross the lair's niche. You listen but cannot speak. At night, when the kitchen's charcoal sinks to a red heartbeat, you whisper your own oratory into the smoke, speeches never to be heard. In Rome, the coins of greatness are pressed from the silence of hands like yours. You were not born into this house. No one is, not even the house itself. It began as a shell and grew fat on neighbors. You were brought here when the Republican centuries were beginning to look like a tired man at the edge of a banquet. Your old city had a theatre and an olive press, a classroom with benches polished by elbows. You left it in a chain. You learned quickly what Rome calls education when it falls into shackles. Your Greek is useful, your handwriting neater than your master's, your memory more obedient than any son. Morning licks the roofs with thin light. You go up the back stairs before anyone important wakes. The cook snores with a ladle in her hand. Her name is Livia to some, and you to others, and she keeps a knife tucked into her sleeve when she walks home at night. The baker's boy has come before dawn with the bread. He grins like a fox. You take the baskets, you count, you praise his mother's ovens because praise oils the day. He tells you the forum smells of wet marble. You pretend you can smell it and tuck the image in your sleeve. In the atrium, your master is still arguing last night's topic while a flute player waits to be paid. Cicero has been consul for months now and believes language can save a city. Your master believes Cicero might save his career. Men in clean hems laugh too loudly. You set a fresh cup by the mosaic dolphin and step back. Your master's thumb touches the rim and leaves a crescent, and years later when you scrub that stain from the cup, you realize it is an indentation in the clay. Nothing in this house is only what it is. The house has a second heartbeat, the slave quarter. It ticks under every marbled step. There a boy named Minimus is all eyes and nerve, too fast for punishments to catch him. He sleeps with his cheek on his fist like someone ready to wake and run. There an older man, Philo, has a back like a folded map and knows every hinge that squeaks. There a woman you should never have looked at looks at you back. She is named Cressa because she was taken from Crete, though she has been here so long that her accent has rubbed smooth. She belongs to the mistress and handles fine wool with a cruelty tender enough to make all the women in the neighborhood bring their shawls to her. When you pass each other in the corridor, it feels like stepping into sunlight. At noon, the master sends you with a sealed tablet to the forum. "To Tiro," he says, and your fingers settle hard around the wax, because that is Cicero's secretary's name, and somehow you hold a sliver of the Republic in your hands. The door slave, who calls everyone friend, as if he could charm iron to float, pats your shoulder and tells you to walk like a person who belongs to someone important. "Do not get interested," he says, not unkindly. Rome steals interest. You walk past bronze heads that never close their mouths. You pass men who wear their politics as if they invented the idea, and dogs with collars that cost more than your mother's house. You learn the forum the way a butcher learns bones, where the ligaments of rumor attach, where the fat of influence is stored. You do not make eye contact with the men who sell people. A shaved-headed Greek boy juggling knives winks at you. You cannot stop hearing the knives sing. You deliver the message, wait for Tiro's reply, and practice breathing like someone who does not notice the shoals of power around him. Tiro sees you. He writes a note with a hand that moves as if the ink pulls it, and he says, "Your master argues like someone who pays his debts on the last possible day." You hide your smile because the ceiling in Cicero's office is high, and your mouth might echo. On your way home, you pass a man reciting an accusation about a governor in Sicily. Someone throws him a coin, and he zigs mid-sentence to plant a joke about a senator's expensive wine. The joke lands and the coin chimes on stone. You think rhetoric is not marble, it is bread. In the kitchen that night, the heat makes everything interesting. The steam turns ordinary air ceremonial. Livia washes knives, eyes narrowed at the way oil sheathes steel. Philo tells a story with fewer words than most men use to yawn. Cressa sits on a stool and rewinds thread, her wrists moving like swallows. You begin to speak softly so the smoke can write your words on the rafters. You build a speech that opens with a simple story. A farmer measuring out grain with a bowl that becomes smaller each season and climbs to a question that finds its true subject only after 3 turns. When did the city that lay down laws for the world decide that a whip tells greater truth than a witness? The first time you say this, no one hears it. The second time, Cressa's hands pause. The third, Minimus repeats the last question back to you later in the courtyard with bread in his cheek and gets scolded for speaking like a senator. You smile so hard your face hurts. Your master trusts you with more errands. You copy his notes. You sharpen his stylus. You whisper the dates of past court appearances in his ear when he misremembers. He begins to use you privately for a service that speaks to both your danger and your possibility. He has you listen to his speech drafts and then repeats them back to you. He gauges his own phrases by whether you stumble. You discover you can steer him a fraction of a degree by stumbling at certain words and letting others carry you. If he notices, he pretends not to. A man in his position appreciates an oar that pretends to be water. One night he calls you farther into the triclinium than any slave goes. "You hear?" he says. "You remember?" What is Rome hearing? He waves his cup at a room that contains only the 2 of you. You say, after a moment, "Rome hears a door with 2 hinges. One squeaks for Catiline, the other for fear he stares as if you have said something dangerous. Perhaps you have. He swallows wine and his lips shine. "You are Greek," he says, as if that explains you. He does not thank you. He never will. The house breathes in guests, a praetor who has never paid in full for anything but wants the appearance of largesse. A widow whose bracelets sing when she turns her wrist. A young tribune, soot on his hem because he enjoys being seen among the poor. The mistress greets them as if she knows the termination of their stories and is only being polite to time. She tells Cressa to hang more lamps. You stand at the edge of the light and recite the inventory in your head: 6 lamps, 12 cups, 3 pitchers, 1 dolphin mosaic, 1 master, swelling with borrowed eloquence. He performs lines you have adjusted for him, and the widow laughs in the exact place you hoped, and the tribune's eyes go narrow when he hears the hinge creak of fear. In your sleeping space, the air smells of damp wool and history. You dream you are in front of the Senate with a speech in your mouth and no chain on your ankle. In the dream, your words make a shape in the air as exact as the curve of a kiln. You wake with your heart beating against your ribs like a hand against a door. The hand is yours and the door is too. A month passes like a parade of shadows. News spreads that a friend of your master has been accused of graft. The word spreads with the certainty of mold. Your master swears he has never taken more than the city allows. The city allows more to some. The day he loses his temper, he takes it out on Minimus for dropping a fig. You feel your body walk forward before your mind decides. You say, carefully, "If the boy is beaten, your guests will know you punish hunger more quickly than bribery." The room goes cold with the terrible weather of truth. The master looks at you the way a dog looks at thunder. He spares the boy because he cannot afford to be seen angry at a fruit. Later, he will punish Minimus anyway. Later, he will punish you. Rome writes its decisions over a long timeline. The ink dries slowly. When the punishment comes, it is not the lash. He makes you into air. He does not speak to you for a week, which means you do not exist except as a tool that moves under other hands. You take orders from a freedman who hates that he is free because it means he is obligated. You are sent to Count Amphore in a warehouse that smells like old sea. Your fingers splinter on wicker. That week, you become the ghost of a city that turns on the will of men who never carry their own keys. You learn a different rhetoric, the speech of absence. You never make anyone angrier than when you deprive him of an audience. The week ends because everything ends. Your master summons you to his study and speaks to you as if nothing has occurred. "I am not your world," his tone says, "and that is my greatest mercy." He gives you a wax tablet with a name on it, one of the equities who manages money the way a chemist manages metals, and sends you to fetch a letter that should never exist. You understand, standing there, the thrilling risk he is asking you to shoulder. If anyone catches you, the letter becomes yours. Your heart becomes a coin that flips between futures. One stamped with freedom for loyal service, one with death for someone else's secret. You walk slower than you have ever walked. The Equed lives in a house where the floor is a polished lake. His steward hands you a sealed packet, wrapped in an extra layer of silence. You hold it to your chest like a shield. You carry it back through streets that shine with worry. At a corner, a group of men argue about grain. At another, a girl washes clothes and sings. You cross a square where a poet is reciting lines that use cats to talk about consuls, and your brain writes down the best two metaphors while your body sweats under the weight of someone else's danger. In the kitchen, the fire is cheerful. You have the face of a man who listened to a thief name you as his alibi, Livia says, and hands you a fig with a bruise that tastes better than honesty. Cressa bandages a child's knee and tells him to hold the bandage as if it were a promise. You sit on the step with the letter under your tunic and wonder what freedom is worth if it buys you the right to look away. That night, you go to the roof to bleed your thoughts into the wind. Cressa follows. She stands beside you without touching you, because in Rome proximity is a dialect that can ruin people. You are trying to decide whether to tell the truth, she says. That much is obvious. You laugh without sound. Truth for whom? For the house, she says. For the city? For yourself. They are three truths, and they have an ugly history together. You make a decision you do not name, and the letter goes where it was meant to go. Your master forgets to thank you again because thanking makes the thanked equal to the one who gives thanks, and some men would rather forget gratitude than surrender height. But after that, after your choice, he begins to call you in the evenings with a look that complicates both of your rations. He asks you questions he cannot ask his peers without admitting ignorance. What does the street say? What rumour opened its eyes today? What word travels faster, fear or bread? You answer with care because you are laying stones across a river that may rise tomorrow. Cicero's voice swells in the city. Catiline flees. The Senate breathes like a bellows. If history is a public play, you watch from the wings where actors lower their masks and complain about the weight of godhood. Tiro sees you again and says, your master owes you a tunic because winter is coming and the sleeves of yours are thin. He says, do not die for a man who would trade your death for a clever turn of phrase. He says it kindly, so the words strike where kindness always strikes, the place that still believes there is a correct way to live. One night, Rome throws a storm like a tantrum. The rain hammers the roof tiles. In the courtyard, the Lair's shrine glitters with candlelight. The master's friend, drunk, frightened, important, arrives desperate, his cloak shiny with water. He talks too fast, the way men do when they have finally outrun their own cleverness and found no ground beneath it. He says, someone will testify that the governor's accounts were not only cooked but dined upon, that names will roll through the courier like barrels down a hill. He wants the master to destroy a ledger. He wants you to bring it. You fetch it because you are told to fetch it, because that is what fate calls a chain when it wants to stay pretty. But when you return to the study, you do not let go. The ledger is heavy with numbers that are really stories. The master looks at you, puzzled that iron is resisting him. The friend looks at you as if you are furniture that has decided to sing. "I cannot burn this," you say, and your voice shocks you because it has not asked permission to be brave. "It belongs to Rome." The friend laughs like a man who has mistaken a cliff for fog. "You belong to Rome," he says. "This is paper." The master's mouth opens and closes twice, and you realize he is counting arguments, weighing which will cost less tomorrow morning. "You will burn it," he says finally, softly, like someone asking a question with a knife behind it. "And you will forget." You do not understand until then why people choose martyrdom. You have dismissed it as laziness or hunger for applause. Now you feel the heat of something steady rise in you and set your hands. You move the ledger just out of the lamplight. "Make me free," you say, "and I will throw this book into the fire and forget. Make me free, and I will forget by law." There is a silence, like the silence after a slap. The master looks at you as if he has discovered a room in his own house. The friend gapes. Rain hisses in the courtyard. Somewhere water finds a loose tile and drops rhythmically into a basin, a clock that counts a kind of courage. The master could lie, promise liberty on paper, and retract it in practice. He could call for the door slave and have you dragged out. He could kill you and call it housekeeping, or, rare, ruinous, he could bargain. "Why should Rome pay for your virtue?" he asks. You think of Cressa's wrists winding thread, of Minimus asleep like a drawn bow, of Livia's knife warm against her arm, of Philo's careful hands, of Tiro's warning, of Cicero's turning phrases, of the baker boy's fox grin, of the forum's wet marble. You think of your mother teaching you to shape your name slowly so the letters would remember you when you were gone. "Because Rome has eaten enough of it for free," you say, surprising yourself. "Because the city has bought its eloquence with bodies. By this one openly, he does not smile, though you have given him a line he could sell in a courtyard and make money." He leans back, considers the ceiling, listens to the rain spend itself. "In a year," he says. "Not now. I cannot be seen freeing you now without telling every neighbor where my accounts live. In a year, if this blows over. If your work remains as good as your nerve." He looks at the friend who has the expression of a man who wants to leave through any door, even an imaginary one. "And if it does not blow over," the master adds, so softly that only you hear it, "there will be no Rome to be free in." This is not a promise, it is a question with a leash. You take it anyway. You burn the ledger. The fire eats evidence the way a story eats mistakes. The friend exhales theatrically, already pretending he never asked for this. The master closes his eyes for a moment, which is the most honesty he has allowed himself in years. The next morning, Cressa wraps a strip of linen around your wrist as if you were injured. "This is for remembering," she says. "Or for making forgetting feel like a kind of remembering." You kiss the inside of her forearm so quickly it looks like a breath. She closes her hand around your neck, her thumb under your jaw, a gesture that has more history than tenderness. "Do not make a habit of saving men who would sell you," she says. "Even gods get bored of that story. Life falls back into its disciplined noise." You copy letters. You polish the household god and tell him the weather. You carry wine and count cups returned. You teach Minimus to sharpen a stylus without breaking it. You steer your master's speeches by stumbling gracefully as if tripped by conscience. Tiro nods to you in the forum the way soldiers acknowledge each other across camps. A poet mentions you without knowing you exist. People with clean hems go on believing that marble is stronger than sweat. Rumors turn into laws, laws turn into rumors. Catiline is a ghost, Cicero's tongue grows tired. The city rehearses a tragedy it will perform for a century. You keep your promise to labor because promises are the only prayers a slave is allowed to say aloud. The mistress asks Cressa whether you look different lately, and Cressa laughs as if difference could fit inside any single body. He is learning to keep his shoulders low, she says. That is how free men walk. It is not true, but you love her for saying it. Spring opens the skull of winter and pours light inside. The baker's boy has a scar on his knuckle now, and an apprentice he bosses too sweetly. Livia chases a rat and declares public victory when the cat catches it. Philo stares too long at the river some afternoons, and you realize he is arguing with a country he will never see again. Minimus grows into a name that does not suit him. He will require a taller word. You do not count the days to the promised year because counting makes time a tyrant. You teach yourself to love work you did not choose. You become the person Cressa said in a whisper you might someday become, a man who owns his own silence. Your master speaks to you more often, though never where anyone might draw conclusions. He asks what the street thinks of a general whose victories arrive home faster than his soldiers. You tell him the street thinks bread first, then banners. He repeats it in the Senate like something he invented, and men with white hems nod because the truth sounds truer when it comes from a throat with a ring on it. The year arrives like a servant at the door. It knocks once and waits. You do not remind the master. You bring him figs and watered wine and popular arguments. He avoids your eyes for 3 days because promises come into rooms before the men who made them do. On the 4th day, he says, "Come at night." You come. Cressa is at her loom with a frown you love because it proves she expects things. The master has a document and a witness because Rome prefers freedom to look like paperwork rather than weather. Your name slides into new grammar. The iron bracelet that used to kiss your ankle sits on the table like an obsolete word in a poem. He says, "You will stay in the house as a client, or we will not pretend I am more generous than I am." You bow the way men bow when they are trying to learn a new kind of spine. Freedom is not a single event, but a series of lessons. The first lesson is that the city does not change its behavior merely because your wrist does. Men who never looked at you still do not. Men who looked through you now look past you. The cook gives you orders out of habit for a week and then remembers and swears affectionately. Minimus tries to steal your shoes and you let him because he is growing so fast you want him to run ahead of his own name. Cressa kisses you openly once in the corridor and then slaps your shoulder hard as if reattaching you to the world. You rent a room the size of a promise near the Forum. You carry a reed pen and a cheap authority. Men begin to pay you to listen to their speeches fall apart and to help them catch the pieces and lay them out in an order that suggests plan rather than accident. It is not the Senate, but it is power in the form Rome understands best, attention purchased by phrases. You refuse to write for men who buy boys. You refuse to write for men who sing other people's poems and call them their own. You make enemies with a neat hand and sleep well when your room is quiet enough to hear your own breath choose you. Your master, your former master, employs you because he can say he elevated a man and because your ear is worth more than your obedience ever was. At a dinner, he introduces you with a phrase that equals both compliment and leash. The guests judge your Latin, then your shoes. The tribune with soot on his hem has become a man whose hems are clean. He watches you as if you have stolen something he mislaid years ago. The widow's bracelets still sing when she turns her wrist. You write a phrase that makes her stop singing for one breath and close her eyes. Later she pays your rent for a season without explanation. You think sometimes of the ledger you burned and of the Roman habit of hiring the men whose silence they have bought. You keep a ledger of your own in your head. It does not tally coin, It counts the number of times a sentence has unhooked cruelty from a decision, the number of times a boy has kept his skin because a man learned to argue with himself before he argued with the room. The numbers are not large, but they exist, and in a city like this, existence is a win. One afternoon, when the wind blows the Tiber's smell all the way up to your window, Tiro finds you in the portico of Pompey's theatre and says, "Cicero read something of yours." You swallow foolishly because your throat is still sometimes a slave, and he laughs. "Do not worry." He does not know it is yours. He thinks it is Rome's. He sits beside you and stares at the people who think they are scenery in their own lives. "There are worse fates than being taken for the voice of a city," he says. "But I hope someone knows your name." "Some do," you say. "You mean Cressa and Livia and Philo and Minimus who needs a new name? You mean the boy at the bakery who will someday be a man? You mean the door slave who calls everyone friend because sometimes it works? You mean a god in a hallway niche you still polish when you pass because gratitude is a habit you borrowed from slavery and kept?" The Republic continues to act like a stage with too many actors. The generals learn to study crowds as if they were maps. The crowds learn to ask bread questions and call them philosophy. You keep writing. Your sentences go out on other people's breaths and come back as law, or policy, or gossip. A man you despise uses one of your lines to win a case that will make him crueler. You drink wine until your tongue forgets how to pronounce his name and then start again. You cannot control the mouths your words inhabit. You can only choose the words carefully and hope some of them make courage twice as common as fear. At night, you still walk the roof sometimes. The city lights itself like a cautious animal. The sky tells a story older than any consul. Cressa sits with you and gives you a piece of bread, so fresh it burns your fingers. "Would you have made it?" she asks suddenly, looking not at you but at the smear of stars. "As a slave, if liberty never came?" You look down into the courtyard, where a new boy carries water with the impatience of the young. You remember the day you used your voice like a blade in a room with rain, and 2 men and a ledger. You remember the many days when you said nothing, because saying something would only make a prettier cage. You think of the speeches you whispered into kitchen smoke, the questions you set in the air where only a few could hear them, the way Minimus once repeated your words with crumbs on his lip. "Yes," you say finally, "I would have made it. But I would not have confused survival with justice." Cressa nods. "The first is a set of tricks," she says. "The second is a craft. Tricks anyone can learn. Craft demands a life." She leans her head on your shoulder as if you were a doorpost and she were hanging a garland. "We have the one we have." You stand there until the bread cools in your fingers and the stars drift. A singer across the street rehearses scales. Somewhere a man tells a story in a courtyard and changes a detail to make himself taller. The night smells like olive wood and old coins. You think, could you make it as a slave in Roman times? You could. Many do. You did. But the better question is the one you keep pressing on the city like a seal into wax. Can Rome make it as a city that does not require slaves to hold its roof up? The roof is heavy. The city pretends not to notice. Your work is to notice and to make others notice, and to lay words like stones where people will step without knowing who set them there. The next morning, you wake early and write a sentence that lands with the weight of a law. You sharpen the stylus. You unroll the wax. You trade what is left of your silence for the closest thing Rome has to a future. You carry the tray, figs, watered wine, a phrase bright enough to illuminate the seam where mercy and policy join, and you keep your hand steady as you cross the mosaic border. The dolphin at your feet leaps forever toward a sea that never answers. You step past him into the room where men perform their worries and call them wisdom. You stand in your accustomed place and breathe like a man who understands the difference between what he can choose and what he must endure. You listen. You cannot help yourself. You begin to speak softly, where only the smoke can hear you. As the shadows lengthen and the stars begin to whisper, we close the pages of this ancient tale. In the hush of night, truth rests where faith once stood strong. Sleep gently now, wrapped in the echoes of empires long gone. Until next time, when darkness falls and another lullaby of a fallen world begins.